car that looks like it rolled straight out of a Silicon Valley design lab, priced at just $21,000. No, it's not a Tesla stripped of its features. It's not a budget Chinese knockoff either. It's built in India, and the company behind it has just done something that neither Tesla nor BYD saw coming. Because while the world's biggest EV players were busy fighting each other at the top, Tata Motors quietly walked in through a door nobody else noticed was open, and what they brought through that door is about to change the math on every electric vehicle on the planet. Now, before you dismiss this as just another India story, consider this. Tata Motors already owns Jaguar Land Rover. They've been pulling 5-star global safety ratings on cars that cost a fraction of what European brands charge. And they've been building their EV ecosystem, batteries, supply chain, charging network for years, while other companies were still debating whether EVs were even a real market. That kind of preparation doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a company is playing a completely different game than everyone else. To understand why the Curve EV matters, you first need to understand what kind of company Tata actually is, because most people outside India have no idea how deep this runs. It started not as a car company, but as an industrial empire. Steel, hotels, energy, infrastructure. Jamsetji Tata, the man who laid the foundation, had one obsession: that India should stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's greatest industrial nations. That mindset never left the company. It just evolved. And today, that same long-term thinking is exactly what's giving Tata an edge that no startup EV brand can replicate overnight. Here's what separates Tata from almost every other player in this game. Most companies build for today's profit. Tata builds for the next decade. When the global conversation around EVs was still just noise, Tata was already locking in battery partnerships, developing local supply chains, and quietly dominating the Indian EV market before it even fully existed. By the time Tesla started seriously eyeing India and BYD began pushing into Southeast Asia, Tata had already built the trust, the infrastructure, and the manufacturing muscle to compete. And trust, as it turns out, is the one thing money can't buy quickly. Their safety record alone tells you everything. Models like the Nexon and the Punch didn't just pass safety tests, they shocked the industry. Global NCAP ratings that put them in the same conversation as cars costing twice as much. In markets where buyers are starting to care more about surviving a crash than about having a touchscreen that talks back to them, that reputation is worth more than any marketing campaign. And now that same philosophy, build it right, build it safe, build it to last, has been poured directly into the Curve EV. But here's where it gets truly interesting. Because Tata's rise didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened inside one of the most brutal, complicated, and rapidly shifting markets on Earth. And to understand why the Curve EV is such a big deal, you need to understand the battlefield it just walked onto. The electric vehicle market looks like a revolution from the outside. Clean energy, futuristic design, no more gas stations. But from the inside, it's a war. And right now, that war is being fought between two very different empires with two very different weapons. On one side, you have Tesla, the company that convinced the world that an electric car could be desirable, powerful, and worth paying a premium for. On the other, you have BYD, the Chinese giant that decided the real power move was volume, making EVs cheap enough that the average family could actually consider one. Both strategies have worked. Both have made billions. And yet, there is still a massive portion of the global population that cannot afford either of them. That gap is not an accident. It's the result of a problem that has been sitting at the heart of the EV industry since the very beginning, and almost nobody has figured out how to solve it. The problem is the battery. Not the idea of the battery, but the actual cost of building one. Right now, the battery alone accounts for anywhere between 30 and 40% of an EV's total production cost. That's not a small number. That's the single biggest reason why electric cars are still considered a luxury purchase in most parts of the world. And what makes the battery so expensive? The materials inside it. Lithium, cobalt, nickel. These aren't materials you find lying around. They're mined from specific parts of the world, processed through complex supply chains, and traded on global markets that are constantly being influenced by geopolitics, demand spikes, and supply shocks. Every time there's tension in the Congo, every time lithium prices swing in South America, the cost of building an EV battery moves with it. That instability gets passed on to the buyer. Every single time. Tesla solved this problem by going upmarket. If the car is going to be expensive, make it expensive on purpose. Turn it into a status symbol. Sell the software, the autopilot, the over-the-air updates, the supercharger network. Charge premium prices and justify them with a premium experience. It worked brilliantly for the people who could afford it. But for the billions who couldn't, Tesla was never really an option. It was always a dream car, not a realistic purchase. BYD took a different swing. They brought production in-house. Batteries, chips, motors, they built the entire stack themselves to cut costs at every layer. And it worked. Their sales numbers are staggering. But here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. BYD's low prices don't survive export. The moment you add shipping costs, import duties, local taxes, and dealer margins, a BYD that's affordable in China becomes considerably less affordable in Thailand, in Nigeria, in Brazil, or in Germany. The cost advantage evaporates the further you get from the factory. So even BYD, for all its scale, hasn't cracked the code on making EVs genuinely accessible everywhere. And then there's the infrastructure problem, which might actually be the sneakiest barrier of all. Because buying an EV isn't just a purchase decision. It's a lifestyle decision. You're betting that your city has enough charging stations, that fast charging is actually available near you, that you won't get stranded on a highway because the only charger in range is broken. In developed countries, this is getting better, slowly. In developing countries, it's still a daily anxiety for most EV owners. That fear, rational or not, keeps millions of potential buyers parked firmly in the petrol lane. And even the buyers who do make the switch carry another quiet worry with them. What happens to the battery after 5 or 7 years? If it degrades badly, replacement costs can wipe out every cent saved on fuel. That uncertainty is a wall that even the best marketing can't fully knock down. So here's the picture. Two dominant players, both with massive advantages, both with significant blind spots. A global market full of buyers who want EVs but can't justify the price, the range anxiety, or the infrastructure risk. And sitting right in the middle of all of that, a gap. A space that nobody has claimed yet. A price point and product philosophy that could serve the people Tesla ignores and go places BYD can't reach. That's the space Tata just stepped into. And the way they did it is not what anyone expected. The first thing people notice about the Curve EV is the design. And that's exactly the point. Because in a market where most Indian SUVs have traditionally been boxy, upright, and built for practicality over personality, Tata came out with something that looks like it belongs at a European motor show. The rear roofline slopes like a coupe. The front grille is sealed and sharp. The LED lights cut across the face of the car like something you'd expect from a brand 3 times the price. This is not an accident of styling. It is a calculated statement. Tata is not trying to compete in the budget EV space. They're trying to own the perception of premium, and then price it where the middle class actually lives. The coupe SUV concept is important to understand because it's not just aesthetic. It tells you something about who Tata is building this car for. The new generation of buyers in India, and increasingly across emerging markets, doesn't just want a car that works. They want a car that says something about them. They want road presence. They want something that doesn't look like every other vehicle on the street. And they want it without having to choose between design and affordability. The Curve EV is Tata's answer to all 3 of those wants at once. But design, no matter how good, doesn't make a car worth taking seriously. Engineering does. And this is where the Curve EV starts to get genuinely impressive. Under that sloping roofline sits something Tata calls the Gen 2 Electron Volts platform. The name sounds like marketing language, but what it actually represents is a fundamental shift in how the car was conceived. Most automakers, when they first entered the EV space, took the easy road. They took an existing petrol or diesel platform, the frame, the body structure, the wheelbase, and retrofitted it for electric. Swap out the engine, drop in a battery pack, add a motor. It worked, but it always came with compromises. Ride quality suffered. Space was awkward. Safety wasn't optimized. And the weight distribution was never quite right because the whole thing was designed around an engine that was no longer there. Tata did it differently. The Gen 2 platform was designed from a completely clean sheet, specifically for an electric vehicle. That means the battery isn't crammed in wherever space allowed. It's laid flat under the entire floor of the car, exactly where it should be for an EV. This changes everything. Lowering the battery lowers the center of gravity. Lower center of gravity means the car handles more like a sports sedan than a tall SUV. Cornering becomes more confident. High-speed stability improves dramatically, and the cabin floor stays flat, which actually creates more usable interior space rather than less. It's the kind of engineering decision that sounds small until you're driving the car and wondering why it feels so much better than you expected. Performance follows naturally from the platform. When the motor and battery are designed to work together from the beginning rather than adapted to fit each other, power delivery becomes seamless. Acceleration is smooth and linear. No lurching, no delay, just immediate and confident response when you press the pedal. In city traffic, this makes a genuine difference. And because the whole structure is lighter and more aerodynamically optimized than a converted platform, the range improves as well. The Curve EV is expected to deliver somewhere between 400 and 500 kilometers on a real-world charge, depending on how you drive. For daily commuters covering 30 to 50 kilometers a day, that means charging every few days, not every night. The battery itself is lithium-ion, the same chemistry used by Tesla, BYD, and virtually every serious EV maker today. But Tata hasn't just sourced a standard pack and dropped it in. They've tuned it specifically for Indian conditions. High ambient temperatures, dusty roads, stop-and-go urban traffic that cycles the battery constantly. These are conditions that destroy poorly managed battery packs over time, and Tata has addressed them directly through a thermal management system that keeps the battery within its optimal temperature range, regardless of what the weather or the road is doing. Liquid cooling handles the heavy lifting, maintaining battery health whether you're charging fast on a highway stop or crawling through a crowded city at noon in summer heat. And then there's the cost question, because all of this engineering sounds expensive. The Gen 2 platform is modular. The same base architecture can be used across multiple different vehicle models, meaning the enormous cost of developing it gets spread across an entire product lineup rather than sitting entirely on one car. Tata spent the money once and can recover it many times over. Combined with local manufacturing, supply chain control within the Tata Group itself, and government incentives pushing EV production in India, the numbers start to make sense. This isn't a cheap car. It's an efficiently built one. There's a difference, and the Curve EV is the difference in physical form. Here is the part of the story that the big players really don't want to talk about. Because if the Tata Curve EV delivers on what it's promising, premium design, solid engineering, 400+ kilometers of range, and a starting price around $21,000, it doesn't just succeed as a car. It breaks a psychological barrier that the entire EV industry has been hiding behind for years. The idea that you can't have premium and affordable in the same vehicle. That you have to choose. Tata is about to prove that you don't. And once that's proven, the pressure on every other manufacturer becomes enormous. Think about what Tesla's pricing argument is built on. It's built on the idea that the technology, the brand, and the experience justify the cost. That there's no real alternative that gives you what Tesla gives you at a lower price. The moment a credible, well-built, well-designed EV appears at half that price point, that argument gets harder to make. Tesla will have to respond. Whether that means cutting prices, launching lower-cost models faster, or repositioning their existing lineup, something will have to give. And for a company that has always treated its price point as a feature, that's a genuinely uncomfortable position to be in. BYD faces a different kind of pressure. Their strength is scale and cost control, but their weakness has always been brand perception outside of China. In markets across Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, people don't yet have an emotional connection to BYD the way they do to established brands. Tata, on the other hand, has decades of trust built in many of those same markets through commercial vehicles, buses, and trucks. When Tata enters those markets with an EV that's competitively priced and backed by a brand people already recognize, BYD suddenly has a fight on its hands that has nothing to do with battery chemistry or production scale. It's a fight about trust. And trust takes years to build from scratch. The global implications go even further than the competitive dynamics between these three companies. For the past decade, China has effectively controlled the EV supply chain. Battery materials, manufacturing scale, export volume, the numbers have been lopsided in China's favor, and the rest of the world has been dependent on that single point of production in ways that are starting to make governments nervous. India's emergence as a serious EV manufacturing hub changes that equation. It doesn't eliminate China's advantage overnight, but it introduces an alternative, a second major production center with its own cost advantages, its own supply chain development, and its own government backing. Diversification of global EV production is good for everyone, except for anyone who benefited from the monopoly. India's cost structure makes this genuinely viable. Labor costs are lower than in most of the developed world. Local component manufacturing is growing rapidly, supported by policies designed specifically to reduce import dependency. The Tata Group itself contains companies that produce steel, electronics, and components that flow directly into the Curve EV supply chain, eliminating layers of markup that competitors pay to third parties. And the Indian government has been consistent in its support for EV adoption through subsidies, reduced taxes on EV purchases, and infrastructure investment. All of this creates conditions where a company like Tata can build a globally competitive product without needing globally comparable costs. The smart technology inside the Curve EV completes the picture. A large central touchscreen manages navigation, climate, and vehicle settings in one clean interface. ADAS features, lane assist, adaptive cruise control, emergency braking, that were exclusive to luxury vehicles just 5 years ago are now standard equipment. The car connects to a smartphone app so you can monitor battery status, check if the car is locked, and pre-cool the cabin before you even get in. Tata hasn't tried to copy Tesla's all-in software approach, where the entire driving experience depends on a screen. Instead, they've taken a more practical line, smart where smart matters, physical controls where reliability matters. For markets where tech savviness varies widely across the buyer base, that balance is the right call. But the biggest shift that the Curve EV represents isn't technical. It's philosophical. For a long time, the story of EVs has been written almost entirely by Western innovation and Chinese manufacturing. The rest of the world has been the audience, the market to sell into, not the place where the game gets invented. Tata's Curve EV is a signal that this is changing. That emerging markets aren't just destinations for second-generation technology. That they can be the source of first-generation thinking. The car wasn't designed to be good enough for India. It was designed to be genuinely competitive globally, and then priced for the world that actually exists, not the wealthy minority at the top of it. If that philosophy spreads, if other Indian manufacturers or manufacturers in other emerging economies start playing the same game, the entire EV market resets. Prices come down not because companies are cutting corners, but because competition forces genuine efficiency. More people get access to EVs sooner. Range anxiety shrinks as infrastructure investment follows demand. Battery technology improves faster as more players enter the research ecosystem. And the transition away from fossil fuels, which was always supposed to be for everyone, actually starts to look like it might be. The Curve EV is one car, but what it represents is a shift in who gets to define what's possible. And that story is just getting started.